Once the maester had left, Sansa remained in her seat, gazing out at the churning sea. War was coming, and she, who once dreamed of songs and tournaments, found herself dreading the clash of steel. She wondered if Joffrey was preparing for war too, or if he was hiding behind the Lannister men. A tremor of sadness quivered through her. The realm felt so much bigger now, so much more dangerous than the world she'd imagined. When the time for departure finally arrived, the courtyard of Storm's End became a bustling testament to war in the making. Columns of spearmen from the Stormlands arrived daily, bearing the crowned stag banner. Knights in plate armor, squires leading extra horses, carts loaded with food and supplies each day. More men answered Stannis' call, though some lords held back to see which way the winds of power might blow. Stannis took direct charge of organizing the host. His legendary thoroughness extended to ration distributions, camp follower regulations, and even the maintenance of siege engines. Meanwhile, Renly worked behind the scenes to ensure the Stormlander lords felt personally invested in this cause. The younger Baratheon was skilled in forging personal bonds, with warm laughter and private reassurances that their loyalty would be rewarded once Stannis sat the Iron Throne. Ned spent the days inspecting the northern contingent that had come south with him, only a handful of men, but each resolute. He also oversaw the final arrangements for Sansa and Arya's safety. In council, he urged Stannis to leave a credible garrison at Storm's End, just in case the Lannisters attempted a sudden strike from the sea. Stannis, though reluctant, agreed that some measure of defense was prudent. The moment for farewells came all too quickly for Sansa. She clung to her father, tears glinting in her eyes. "You're leaving again," she whispered. "Must I stay behind?" Ned tried to smile reassuringly, though his own heart was heavy. "Yes, sweet one. War is no place for you. The walls of Storm's End are strong. You'll be safe here with good men to guard you." Arya stood nearby, hands balled at her sides. "I want to come," she insisted, though her voice was not as loud as usual. "I can fight." Ned shook his head. "No, Arya. This is not a tourney or a sparring match. If we meet the Lannisters on the field, it will be brutal. I won't put you in that danger." Her mouth twisted in frustration, but she did not argue further, perhaps sensing the dread that lay behind Ned's calm exterior. Instead, she hugged him fiercely. Renly approached, looking unusually solemn. "Lord Stark, our scouts are prepared. We should ride soon if we want to make camp near Summerhall by nightfall." Ned nodded, giving his daughters one last look. "Be brave, Sansa. Be strong, Arya. The gods willing, I'll return victorious." Then he turned away. The horns sounded, and the gates of Storm's End swung open. Soldiers marched out in ordered columns, war horses snorting in the cold morning air. Stannis rode at the head, wearing dark armor emblazoned with the flaming heart and stag. Renly rode beside him, banner in hand. Ned followed with his northern men, each step echoing with the clang of steel and the heavy drum of hooves. Sansa and Arya stood on the walls, watching the army snake across the horizon like a river of metal and cloth. For Arya, it was a thrilling sight, thousands of men going to do battle for a cause. For Sansa, it was a vision out of a nightmare. She squeezed Arya's hand, silently praying for their father's safe return. Far away, in the Red Keep of King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister paced atop the marble floor of the throne room. The Iron Throne loomed behind her like a menacing beast of metal, but she seemed as proud as ever, her golden hair pinned in a regal braid. At the foot of the throne, the Kingsguard knights stood watch, their white cloaks stark against the polished tile. A messenger knelt before her. "My queen, word has arrived from our spies near Storm's End. Stannis Baratheon marches at the head of an army, accompanied by Renly Baratheon and Eddard Stark." Cersei's green eyes hardened. So the fool has chosen to unite with his younger brother after all. She took a measured breath, controlling the flash of anger that threatened to rise. "Do we know how many men he commands?" "Reports suggest a host of perhaps 15,000, my queen, Stormlanders, plus whatever Stannis brought from Dragonstone. And rumors are that the North prepares to join them as well. They aim to reach King's Landing, maybe within a fortnight or two. Cersei's perfectly painted lips twisted in a grim smirk. Stannis thinks to unseat my son from his throne. So be it. We'll see how he fares against wildfire and iron. She turned to the tall, golden-armored figure standing near the dais, Ser Jaime Lannister, newly returned from a mission to the Riverlands. Her brother leaned casually on the pommel of his sword. That's a sizable host. We'll need every advantage here, sister. She narrowed her eyes, stepping closer. What news from father? Is he still pinned in the Riverlands? Jaime offered a shrug. He's holding position near Harrenhal, skirmishing with the Tully forces. Edmure Tully refuses to yield, and my father is wary of a trap. If these Baratheons join with the Riverlords, it could be a problem. But father's no fool. He'll do what's best for House Lannister. Cersei gave an irritated flick of her hand. He should come to King's Landing now with all his might. We must crush Stannis before he gains more support. If Tywin draws out the Riverlands conflict, he might hand Stannis the chance to lay siege to our gates. Jaime's expression grew serious. Father thinks it better to keep the Tullys pinned, so they can't reinforce Stannis. But yes, we risk facing the Stormlander host ourselves in open battle. The city watch might hold, or they might not. You know how fickle Sellswords and guards can be. Cersei squared her shoulders, forcing a regal calm. We'll see about that. We still have the advantage of the capital's walls, our warships in the Blackwater, and the support of the Crownlands. Let them come. We'll make them pay dearly. She dismissed the messenger with a graceful wave, then gestured for Grand Maester Pycelle to approach. Send word to all lords who remain loyal to the crown. I want more men in King's Landing immediately. Promise gold if we must, and send ravens to Pike. Tell them we might be open to an accord. Those Ironborn dogs might serve as a distraction in the north if they think we'll pay them well. Pycelle bowed, wheezing slightly. As you command, my queen. Watching him scurry off, Cersei felt a measure of satisfaction. She would not roll over for Stannis Baratheon or Eddard Stark. No, she would fight like a lioness protecting her cubs. Her gaze flicked to Joffrey, who was not present in the throne room at this late hour, likely off tormenting some servant or boasting with his friends. He may not be Robert's true son, she thought, but he is mine, and I'll see him keep that throne no matter what. On the road toward King's Landing, Stannis's host stretched out across the countryside, making camp each night wherever the terrain allowed. Usually, the vanguard pitched a ring of tents, staking out a defensive perimeter, while the knights and lords set up their own pavilions a short distance away. At twilight on the third night, the wind howled, carrying the taste of salt and brine from the coast. Their camp was near an abandoned holdfast, half collapsed, but enough to serve as a vantage point should any Lannister outriders appear. Ned Stark stood outside his modest tent, gazing into the distance. The grasslands swayed under the gusty wind, and the sky above was a deep purple streaked with clouds. War felt close, too close. He could almost sense the tension among the men, the quiet dread that preceded every major battle. Memories of Robert's rebellion flickered through his mind. The siege of Storm's End, the assault on the Trident, the final push that toppled the Targaryen dynasty. Now another dynasty threatened the realm, and once again, Ned found himself in the thick of it. Footsteps crunched behind him. He turned to see Renly Baratheon, cloak pulled tight against the wind. "Lord Stark," Renly greeted him quietly. "We haven't spoken much since leaving Storm's End. I wanted to see how you fare." Ned nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips, as well as one can when marching to war. "You?" Renly exhaled, producing a curling plume of vapor in the cold air. "I keep wondering if this is truly the best path. I know Stannis is the rightful heir by law, but I can't help recalling Robert's final hours. He named you protector of the realm, did he not?" Ned shifted uncomfortably, recalling the paper Robert had signed. He did. Yet that was meant for the duration of Joffrey's minority, to keep the realm stable until he came of age. But Joffrey is no true son of Robert's. Stannis must be king. Renly fell silent for a moment, his face thoughtful in the gathering gloom. "Yes," he said at length. "Yes, I know. Still, sometimes I think if I had seized the throne first, declared myself king, maybe we wouldn't be in this predicament. The Tyrells might have rallied behind me more swiftly. We could have contained the Lannisters." Ned's tone hardened. "But that would have been usurpation, with no better claim than Cersei's boy. We must cling to the law. Otherwise, we're no different than the Lannisters." Renly gave a resigned nod. "You're right. It's just, Stannis is not a man who inspires love, only fear or respect. If we do topple the Lannisters, can Stannis keep the realm from tearing itself apart?" Ned looked out at the flickering campfires. "We must hope so, or help him do it. I have faith in the North, the Riverlands, perhaps even the Tyrells if you can secure them. Together, we might stabilize the realm long enough to face the true threat beyond our petty wars." Renly angled his head. "True threat?" Ned hesitated, recalling Melisandre's cryptic warnings. "Something stirs in the far north, beyond the wall. White walkers, ancient evils. I'm not certain I believe all I've heard, but my brother Benjen vanished months ago, and the Night's Watch has sent disturbing reports." Renly's eyes widened slightly. "I thought those were just old tales." "They were," Ned said quietly. "Until now." A hush fell between them. The wind shrieked, rattling the guy ropes of nearby tents. Finally, Renly mustered a thin smile. "One war at a time, I suppose." Ned returned the faint smile. "Aye, one war at a time." Simultaneously, off the coast, the ships loyal to Stannis, led by Ser Davos Seaworth, were positioning themselves near the mouth of the Blackwater. The strategy was to blockade King's Landing from the sea, cutting off trade and supplies. The city still had the Rosby Road and other land routes, but the blockade would hinder any attempt at escape or reinforcement by sea. It was a dangerous gamble, however. King's Landing possessed its own galleys, and if they discovered a weakness in Stannis' naval formation, they might exploit it. Davos stood on the deck of the flagship Fury, scanning the dark horizon. Lanterns aboard the other ships glowed like distant fireflies. He had placed smaller, swifter vessels on lookout duty, spaced apart to detect any approach. The wind whipped his cloak, carrying the sharp tang of brine. Despite the tension of impending battle, Davos felt strangely calm. He had survived the siege of Storm's End, smuggled onions through enemy lines, and been knighted for it. He had faced death before, and he served Stannis out of unwavering loyalty. Below decks, the men whispered of wildfire, the notorious alchemical substance rumored to be hidden beneath the Red Keep. They said the Mad King had once planned to burn the city rather than surrender it. Could the Lannisters wield that same horror against them? Davos prayed it was just rumor. If Cersei or her pet alchemists unleashed wildfire, thousands would die in green flames. But Stannis would not be deterred by the threat. As the rightful king, he believed the city must be taken one way or another. For the sake of the realm, Davos hoped it would be a swift siege with minimal bloodshed. Yet he knew war rarely favored hope over horror. Morning dawned in pale gold as Stannis' army approached the outskirts of King's Landing. Well before they came within sight of the city's gates, outriders galloped back to report that the Lannisters had mustered a defense. The capital's walls bristled with soldiers, siege engines perched on the ramparts. The lion banners of House Lannister flew alongside the Baratheon stag, Joffrey's bastardized sigil. The air hummed with tension. No songs of welcome, no bells of joy, only the hush before a storm. Stannis halted his men on a broad plain outside the city's southern walls. From here, across the Blackwater Rush, they could see the red-tiled roofs of the sprawling metropolis. The Red Keep perched atop Aegon's high hill, overlooking the river. The shimmering waters of the Blackwater Bay stretched beyond, where Davos's blockade was presumably in place. Ned Stark rode to Stannis' side, scanning the fortifications. As Hand of the King under Robert, Ned had never wanted to see these walls under siege. But the day had come. Stannis' eyes were unreadable beneath his helmet. "We'll set camp here," he said quietly. "Then dispatch envoys. I'll offer the city a chance to surrender. If they refuse, we begin preparations for a siege. Renly, riding on the other side, added grimly, let's hope they see sense. Otherwise, thousands will die. Stannis did not respond. He urged his horse forward, commanding his captains to form ranks, set up pavilions, and arrange a defensive line should the Lannisters attempt a sortie. Meanwhile, Ned peeled away to help oversee the deployment of archers and foot soldiers. He glanced toward the city, remembering Sansa's delight, Arya's curiosity, the bustling markets, and the labyrinthine alleys. He had once thought King's Landing might become a home for his family, but it had proven to be a den of vipers. Now those vipers would either yield or be crushed. As night fell, the campfires of Stannis' host lit the plain outside King's Landing like stars fallen to earth. Within the city, the Lannisters' torches and lanterns glowed ominously atop the walls. A single volley of flaming arrows fired by a nervous guard set the watchmen on both sides in alarm, but no full engagement broke out. Even so, tension rippled through the camp. Soldiers slept in their armor, weapons at the ready, uncertain if the morning would bring negotiations or slaughter. In his tent near the front lines, Ned Stark knelt beside a small wooden chest. Inside it lay a few personal items: a token from Winterfell, a lock of Catelyn's hair she had given him when he departed, and Robert's old letter naming him protector of the realm. He stared at that parchment by lantern light, recalling the broken man Robert had become. Yet he had still been Ned's friend, the brother in arms who once fought beside him to depose the Mad King. We're at it again, old friend, Ned thought, a pang in his chest. Battling for the throne you won, to preserve your legacy. If only Robert had recognized Joffrey's parentage sooner, if only he had lived, if only... But war did not bend to if only. War came for them all. Setting the parchment aside, Ned rose. He would rest as best he could. Tomorrow might bring new parley or the first ring of steel. Either way, the fate of the Seven Kingdoms would hang on what transpired at King's Landing's gates. Outside, a cold wind swept across the camp, rustling the banners of Stannis Baratheon, rightful king, and stirring the thoughts of men haunted by the weight of the struggle to come. High on the Red Keep's battlements, a lone figure in golden armor gazed down at the encroaching army, a sardonic half-smile playing over his features. Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, stood watch, keenly aware that history was about to repeat itself. A siege upon King's Landing. But this time, the outcome was far from certain. Thus, two great forces stood at the brink, each convinced of its own right, each prepared to unleash destruction to claim victory. In the quiet hours before dawn, the realm held its breath, and somewhere, in the gloom beyond the wall, an ancient darkness stirred, indifferent to the squabbles of men. But for the moment, all eyes and hearts were fixed upon the Iron Throne, and the question of who would hold it come morning.